In my speech, I'm going to talk about two professors who've had a positive impact on my life. If you've ever had anyone who's your go to person who you could talk to about anything and have a positive but blunt feedback every time, sounds a lot like your parents, right? Well, for me, these two individuals' names are Link Worthen and Chris Gresham, or Chris's preferred nickname, Chris G. The only thing these two had in common was an impact on my life. Other than that, they're like water and oil. I had first met Link at his office on the TJC West campus for a tour of the school and to get an insight on what to expect in the fall. He was very respectful, always had to hear what I had to say, and always gave his input on things that you said. And from that first visit, I could tell that he was going to be a great professor, which he was. He always gave the class a good laugh from his stories or remarks, and at the same time, we were learning more and more every day. A lot of times, students would be sure to know what they're doing, so Link wouldn't crack jokes at them or put them on the spot. And by doing so, that got all of us in our books because no one wanted to be that guy that never knew what to do in labs or never know what the answer was if he asked a question aloud. Once I met Chris, later in the fall, he was more quiet and a lot to himself. He really didn't speak much unless he had to, but if you knew him personally like we do, you wouldn't want him to talk much because he'll give you an earful about anything and everything you didn't know before. I'm sure you've heard the saying that it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure it out. Well, in his earlier days, Chris was in fact a rocket scientist. Aside from Link, Chris was more of the professor who would give you a deadline, and unless your house caught on fire, you got into a car accident, or even had a doctor's excuse, if your assignment wasn't on his desk by that due date, it was a zero. He wasn't very sympathetic. We also had labs in Chris's class as well, and the environment was in fact similar to Link's labs, about knowing and not knowing what to do, because not because he'd crack jokes for the class to hear, but actually because you didn't want to look like you didn't know what you're doing in front of a rocket scientist. With their characteristics, I've began to be a lot more punctual in class, a lot more aggressive, and I picked up my fair share of leadership in the class. Both of these professors had an impact on my life by getting me where I am today academically and financially. Because of my GPA in school, I've earned a summer internship offer from every company that our classes toured, and that wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for these two professors to push me. After today, I work full time as an intern in my hometown, making more than enough to provide for my family at home. My name is Chris Ross, and these two are the men who've had an impact on my life.